Welcome to the Cross Digital Podcast, where journalism meets marketing, and you learn how to hug the storms in your life. And now, here's your host, Dennis Washington.
Hi, I'm Dennis Washington from Cross Digital and CrossDig.com. Hope you're having a great day today. Got a really fun interview for you. This is with Pete Blank. He is the Director of Leadership Development Training for Jefferson County, Alabama. It trains thousands of the civil service employees there here in Jefferson County, where I've worked for many, many, many years. Before that, he had really a cool, interesting career. He spent more than 13 years working at Disney World in the Walt Disney Company. Started out parking cars, but as you will hear in this interview, worked his way up until he eventually was handling the leadership training at Disney, and handled all sorts of leadership training, professional development training at Disney University, which is the training for not only the employees but for the leaders at Disney as well. Came back here to Alabama, where he's now been working the last few years doing leadership training for Jefferson County, the Jefferson County, Alabama, the governmental agencies and all here in the county. Really cool guy. I also, turns out, had TV connection. He worked at the CBS affiliate here in Birmingham, Alabama for several years before he headed back to Florida to work at Disney. So we have a TV connection there from our past history as well. And as I learned recently, and we discussed this in the interview, he and his family survived a direct hit from an F3 tornado back just a couple of years ago. And Pete and I talk about that later in this interview in the podcast, about how that has affected not only his personal life, but also his professional career, because he now, in addition to his job, he does a lot of public speaking engagements about leadership training and so forth. Fantastic interview. Without further ado, let's get into the interview here with Pete Blank. And I'm joined now on the phone with Pete Blank. And Pete, thanks for joining us today.
No problem, Dennis. Thank you for having me, sir.
So tell me a little bit, for the folks that may not be familiar with you or your career, tell folks a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, currently I'm the training manager for all the leadership programs here for the Personnel Board of Jefferson County. Do a lot of leadership training, classroom training for all of our government employees here in Jefferson County. So that includes all the police, fire, all of the administrative people, the Department of Revenue, all of your tax assessors for just about every city in Jefferson County, and including the Jefferson County employees. But I come by the way of Walt Disney World, where I was down working at Disney for about 13 years, doing everything from hotels and resorts, working my way up to the Disney University, where I did leadership training. And ironically, before that, our paths kind of are connected when I worked as a sportscaster at Channel 42 in Birmingham, which used to be known as WBMG, and now I think it's WIAT. Yeah. So got a little bit of everything in the old toolkit.
And the wealth of experiences are good there. The leadership training, and I think probably one of the things when you look across that bio, one of the things that probably attracts more attention than anything to you would be the Disney experience that you experienced for more than 13 years. Tell us a little bit about how you got to Disney and then how you worked your way up.
Well, part of it is you kind of have to have the passion to begin with. Disney's a very interesting organization, like a lot of Fortune 100 companies or Fortune 500 companies. You kind of don't fall into it. You kind of go looking for it. So I was born and raised in St. Petersburg, Florida. So I was born and raised going to Disney once a year, if not twice a year as a kid. And it's one of those things where when you're growing up, you tell your parents, one day I'm going to work here, and
right.
They're like, what are you going to do? And I go, I don't know, I'll do something. But, it's just a very engaging company if it fits your personality style, which, of course, has to be customer service driven and a love for people and a love for kids and a love for entertainment and a love for vacations. And so that kind of fit into my mold. So when I was in college at the University of Florida, I took an internship there, and I worked in the parking lot, which is, pretty much where they put, I guess, all the young interns
sure.
to go out there and park.
Got to start somewhere,
park
I guess.
All summer. Oh, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And which is a funny story, because the president when I was there, his name was Al Weiss. His whole story was that he started clearing out the registers in the Magic Kingdom.
Wow.
So when he was, I think, 18 to 21 or something like that, his job was to go around and clear the registers every night and zero them out back in the day and take it. So, he ended up becoming president. So, most people, again, who become successful in the Disney theme park side of the organization do work their way up.
Yeah.
There is a whole lot of internal growth and promotion there, and that's kind of how I move my way up. Just kind of connecting with people, building relationships, and taking the initiative to kind of see where the openings were, and just doing the best job with the job that I had, and that just kind of gets you noticed. And that's not just at Disney,
Sure.
That's anywhere.
Oh yeah.
Doing the best job with the job you have.
Well, and I guess the next question out of that is, okay, you start parking cars at Disney. At what point did you realize that leadership training at Disney was where you were destined for, what excited you, what was something that was fun to do? What was that point or that moment in the Disney career that made that big transition to such an important position within the company?
Well, that's funny you should ask. I mean, that's we do a lot of training. I talk a lot about mentorships. I talk a lot about finding those seminal moments in your career that kind of jog you a little bit. For me, I really wanted to be a hotel general manager at Disney. That was my goal. I wanted to work in the front desk. I wanted to work in Bell Services. I wanted to work in the food and beverage side. And I was at it was called Port Orleans and Dixie Landings at the time. Now they've consolidated them, and it's just Port Orleans Resort. But basically, I was just working at the front desk, and one of the resident managers came up to me and said, he said, "Hey, we're going to have this big pep rally, and this pep rally is going to be to roll out a new guest service initiative. And we've noticed that you're kind of loud and like to speak in public, and so we want you to host this pep rally." And I said, "Listen," "that's not really my thing. I'm just here working with the customers and all that." And he goes, "No," he goes, I think this is a good fit for you. It's a good growth and development. Just go out there and get people excited." So they put this big tent out back, and we rolled out this new guest service initiative, and my job was to take the microphone around and talk to people. And I guess with my sportscasting background, they said, "Well, okay, we'll go ahead and do this." And what happened from there is someone came up to me and said, "Hey, you were really good at that. You ought to go teach what's called Traditions, which is the new hire orientation program that all Disney employees have to go through." And I said, "Well, I never thought about that. I always thought about resorts, but okay, let me go." So I tried out for that, and I made it. And once I got into that, someone said, "Hey, if you're so good at new hire orientation, you ought to look into leadership training." And from there, it just became a true, it's not something I went looking for, but once I found it, it was definitely what they call the whole right fit role. Kind of thing.
Oh, and I can imagine that. And that kind of is one of the things, listening to you describe all of that, it's not one of those jobs I'm getting, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's not one of those jobs where you could teach someone to do it, but it's one of those things where they bring the skill set to the table, and it's just not one of those jobs for everybody. Is that right?
That's pretty close. Yeah. People. When you're doing leadership training or motivational speaking or professional development training or whatever it is, people. I mean, and this goes for just about any leadership position as well. People connect with the person first, and then the message. So really, you can have somebody up there doing leadership training or doing motivational speaking or doing the corporate training or whatever you want to title it. But if the audience doesn't buy into the person first, then the message is going to get lost. And so you have to have a certain extroversion to you. You have to have a love and a passion for the company. You have to be on 24 hours a day. You have to truly walk the walk. So people aren't going to buy what you're selling. It's so sometimes people talk about leadership training as being a sales role, because what you're trying to do is sell the concept of leadership and the values and the intrinsic values and the return on investment. And if people aren't, if your customer, your client, who is probably your employee, is not buying into you, they're not going to buy into the message.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. When you approach leadership training for any business, but even what you're doing now with Jefferson County, do you have kind of like a plan of action of how you start, a step 1, step 2, step three kind of thing, or is it more of a customized approach, looking at, okay, person A over here already has this skill set, person B doesn't? How does leadership training in that role work?
Yes, it's more the second thing you mentioned. It's very fluid, because what you end up having is you have a standard set of curriculum. For example, at Disney, there's certain mandatory management training and leadership training classes that you have to have. You have to have, customer service. You have to have Disney history. You have to do conflict resolution. You have to know how to deal with angry customers. And there's a core component of instructor-led training that exists. But when you're talking about real leadership training and talking people off of the cliff of moving from management to leadership, and here's the irony: Disney's big on branding and making everything into a cute little acronym and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
You truly, when you work at the Disney organization, everybody's called a leader. You're not a guest service manager, you're a guest service leader, and you're not a manager over human resources, you're the leader of human resources. And it's very interesting, because you're probably doing the management role, but they're like cramming this idea that everybody's a leader down your throat. That's not necessarily the case at all. I mean, there are some people who are built to be managers, and there are some people who are built to be leaders. And I think you have to have a little bit of both to be successful, especially today in today's business environment. I do a lot of training right now for police and fire. Police and fire is your very type A paramilitary mentality, which is do it my way, because I said so, because I'm in charge, because I'm the guy. And not all of them, but that's just as a, if I'm going to paint with a broad brush, that's the police and fire culture. That's the public safety culture. Sure. Trying to get a lot of these, what they're seeing is, and not to get too generationally specific on you, but when you've got a baby boomer, who's been raised that way, they'll do it because I tell them to do it, and they're dealing with these new millennial, Generation Y firefighters who are coming in, who have been raised their life to question authority and push back and get, now you've got a bit of a culture shock there, and then somebody's going to have to give. So that's where leadership training really comes in, when we can start talking to these higher ups and say, here's what you want to be aware of. Here's the skill set you don't have that you thought it may have worked 20 years ago, but it's not going to work for these last 10 years of your career. And kind of how do you flex a little bit? So it's a long answer to a short question. I'm just being very fluid, very fluid with what you offer people.
Absolutely. No, and you raise a great point there, because that's one of the things that. And you could probably speak to this as well as anybody that does leadership training can, with your experience at it, is how leadership training itself has dramatically changed even in the last 10 to 20 years. The culture change, the generational gaps. Looking at that, how much do you think the internet and all the stuff that comes with the ability to instantly communicate, how has that it created any kind of challenge for you when it comes to leadership training? I mean, does it make your job more difficult across the generational gap, or does it help?
Well, yeah, there's kind of two ways to answer that. One is from a training perspective, it has made it more fun. There is a wealth of data that you can get. There is a wealth of knowledge at your fingertips. No longer does a professional trainer have to go to the library, find a book on delegation or find a book on communication skills and create some course content for the adult learner to learn in the corporate environment. I mean, you can just go at a moment's notice to, Yahoo, Google, YouTube, wherever you want to go, and the amount of fresh new data that, for the most part, it's the internet, so we always got to qualify with the internet. But I mean, you can find a lot of refereed journals and information to really help you be up to speed on all the latest leadership trends that are out there. Now, part two of that, which is the danger side of it, is it's a struggle for people in leadership positions. That's where the struggle comes in. And I will give you, there's so many examples here in local government. In today's age of, instant information and Twitter and local internet sites and local news sites and all of that, you still have employees who count on their leaders, on their managers, on their supervisors for information, for data, for whatever. And what they're finding is, and here's a perfect example, someone goes to a county commission meeting and goes to hear the information about possible downsizing or possible RIFs or possible new projects or whatever it may be, and they tell their team, okay, I'll be back in a couple hours and I'll share the information with you. So they go and they get the information, they go to lunch with their friends, they come back to the office, they schedule a meeting to share with them first thing in the morning. Well, you're now 24 hours too late because the reporter who was in the meeting has already tweeted out or put the story out seconds after it happens. So the leader comes back the next day to say, hey, I want to share some information, and every employee goes, yeah, we knew that. We thought so. So all of a sudden, the employees who are dying for this manager to be an effective communicator and share information and build trust, instead they're getting this view of this leader who isn't sharing. And really, the reality is that the internet and Twitter and Facebook are hurting them. Yeah. Because the information is getting out quicker than they want to disseminate it. So it's a huge struggle for anybody today in trying to, especially in the public sector. Because in the public, maybe easier in the private sector. With the public sector, everything being in the news and everything running off of internet sites and stories, right. Stuff gets out there really quick.
When you talk, one thing that came to mind when you were talking about that, the idea of information and I have seen cases where people, and inside the news media and outside the news media, where people grab information and turn around and disseminate it, whichever way that may. I mean, inside the news media, I'd be getting it on TV or on the website or on Twitter or whatever as a breaking news story, or But I've seen the dissemination of news happen so quickly that maybe there wasn't a lot of thought put into it as to whether or not that information was at worst case accurate, but even if it's in the right context, that makes sure that it is well positioned, I guess, in a sense where it's it covers all the bases, But the internet, with the demand for instant information, do you find that leaders are frustrated that they're not getting the time they need to maybe vet or properly set up or frame information before it's disseminated to their employees?
Absolutely, and that's a struggle. And when you talk about training leaders, this whole idea of how, when, and where communication, all of the leadership training used to be, here's how you craft a memo, and here's how you craft an email, and here's when you should share. And now it's a total shift into when, where, why, how of not just that, but also the quickest and the safest and the most economic. Here's a challenge that we're having. We're putting together a in-class training module on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, even Pinterest, things like that. Yeah. And we're about to get pushback from our local cities, I'm sure. This will come out, is why are we spending a training class and sending city employees on taxpayer money down to learn how to use Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest? How is that helping them as an employee? Well, that's the way that information is shared these days. And if you're not prepared to communicate that way, I mean, every single employee may be blocked in their workplace from using those sites, but they're not blocked from their phones.
That's right.
And I don't care what company you're in. Employees, you know this as well as I do. Employees are using their phones on their break time or on their lunch time or on their work time.
Yeah.
To just take a couple minutes to check their feed. And so, if you're not prepared on how to share information that way, whether it's in a professional manner, or even in like a personal information manner, if you're not prepared to learn how to use that, then you're going to fall behind, and you're going to lose the respect of your employees, because you're going to come across that communication skills is one of the biggest things ever, when it comes to leadership. Everybody needs good communication skills.
Right.
But nowadays that doesn't just mean a good talker or a good meeting leader. It also means someone who knows how to effectively use the social media communication tools.
Yeah. And from a business perspective, whether it's a business, private or public sector, the concept that you kind of addressed there is this concept of brand journalism, where businesses now are having to almost evolve their business into something like a miniature newsroom, where they're taking even the simplest information that may only be of internal value, but having to now disseminate it as a journalist would disseminate information to viewers or readers for a newspaper or whatever on an internet site. Every business now is almost having to learn how to become a journalist of some point to both their internal audience and their external audience. And I think the people I've run across, and you tell me if it's any different with the people you meet, the business leaders that I'm running across are either scared or confused or a little bit of both about how to do that.
Absolutely, and then what ends up happening is you start using the shotgun approach, and you start, posting too much, and what department's not posting enough, and there's no strategic plan. And again, that's where I know you come in with helping organizations with their strategic plan. But I mean, we need to remind leaders of things like, it's hard to say that in the year 2013 we have to tell people this, but I just read an article where and an executive of a fairly large organization had to go to a business meeting in the middle of a very small town in the Midwest. Well, he decides to tweet on his own Twitter account, here in town for this, conference. Heaven forbid I stay here longer than 24 hours. I might lose my head, And then, so now here's a high-level executive who was just being funny, but didn't understand that once you tweet it out there, once you put it out there, it reflects on you, it reflects on the organization, it reflects on all this stuff, and so somehow you need to have a strategy in place to kind of rein this in. And I left Disney back in 2007, and we were just on the cusp of this social media stuff getting ready to blow up, and they've done a fairly good job of reining in what they share and what they don't share. There are a lot of rules and regulations and policies about what company employees down there can put on social media, can't put on social media, what you can communicate, what you can't. They keep a very tight rein on their brand, and companies, some may say that that's too extreme, but I think you're well aware that if you don't have some kind of plan in place, one employee who posts something inappropriate could be a huge struggle for your end result.
Absolutely, the reputational risk that comes with that is
huge.
My word. Yeah, I mean, it really, really can. And you're right. People feel like that they're being too restrictive in some cases, but sending an off the cuff tweet is like sending a press release back 10 years ago to all the news media. I mean, that's how it can blow up. So there's no doubt about that. One thing I wanted to, time's running kind of low here, but I did want to get into something a little off topic, but something that an experience you had back just a couple of years ago that really crossed paths with me that I guess I didn't realize at the time till you and I talked recently, but you and your family surviving a tornado, an F3 tornado that came through Jefferson County in January of 2012. It was a tornado when I was still working at the Fox TV station here in Birmingham, Alabama. I chased tornadoes that night. It was too dark to really chase that storm, but I ended up being in your neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods the morning after. Tell us a little bit about that experience of surviving a tornado that hit your house that morning.
Well, it's ironic. I lived in Florida all my life. We moved down there to work at Disney World. I've been through hurricane after hurricane after hurricane. And when we moved up here to Birmingham, Alabama, I told my wife, I said, we're not in danger of tornadoes, are we? She's like, no. If you've been through a hurricane, the chances of tornadoes are slim. And of course, I'm like, we had a good chuckle about that. But it's one of those experiences that you don't wish on anybody. It's quite an interesting experience, and you being a tornado chaser are well aware of that. This one that came through about 4:30 in the morning. It was an F3. It came through Center Point, Alabama, and then over through Clay, over a mountain ridge into Trussville, and touched down a couple times up and down. It ended up our neighborhood, I believe, somewhere around 13 to 17 houses were totally destroyed, and then there was a damage to another like 15 or 20 homes, roof damage, window damage, things like that. But we did what everybody does during a tornado. You know, we live close enough to a tornado siren, which of course you and your peer James Spann will often tell us that, you know, don't count on the siren. So of course now we have the weather app, we have the weather radio, we have all that. But at the time we heard the siren, it was 4:00 in the morning, and we turned on the TV, and they said no, it's going to be okay. It's all west, you know, of Jefferson County. So we went back to bed, and it went off again at 4:30 in the morning, and we woke up and turned the TV on, and they said it's headed toward Trussville. So I said, well, let's go in the basement. You know, nothing's going to happen, but let's go in the basement. So we grabbed the kids and went to the basement, and took us about total 2 or 3 minutes, and by the time we got there and closed the door, the noise, the pressure, we got real lucky that we got to the basement, was just unbelievable. The house, it lasted about probably, my wife would say 3 minutes, but about 30 seconds of just the actual noise, and the actual house collapsed, and the house collapsed on top of us, so we were, I mean, in a sense, we were buried alive, even though we knew that we'd be able to get out. But we were sprawled out on couches, covering our kids, could not move, because, you know, our idea was, well, we'll just stand up now and push the house off of us and walk out. But we couldn't move. We were actually trapped under there. And firefighters, you know, talking about social media, leave it to my 15-year-old daughter at the time, who had her cell phone with her. So she was able to start calling people, Facebooking and tweeting and writing things like, "We're okay, but can someone please call, you know, the fire department?" And they ended up getting us out with no injuries. There were some injuries in our neighborhood, and there was a little bit of loss of life. I shouldn't say a little bit. There was 2 or 3 people, I think, who lost their lives in the neighborhood across from us. But we got very lucky, and it was one of those, you're definitely in shock when you come out and you see the whole neighborhood is gone, and we just rebuilt on the same site, and I got to tell you, I use that story all the time in training, talking about everything from having good workers to come out and support you, to having a plan. We talk about strategic planning, about having, you know, we had no shoes, we had no helmets, we were walking in our nightgowns, you know, we weren't prepared for all things to come with it. So it was an experience that I like to use in a positive way to prepare people for things like that. But it was definitely something you don't want to experience more than once.
No, I agree, and I remember the damage. I had several folks from my church that lived in your neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods, and seeing the damage afterwards. That next morning, I spent the early parts of that morning in the Centerpoint area covering the damage for the Fox station, and then made my way to Clay and Trussville after that later in the day, and it was just incredible to see that. And like you pointed out, coming through at 4:30 in the morning to get such a powerful tornado in the month of January. Folks in even in Alabama, and one of the states that gets tornadoes a lot, and especially in the last few years, that's a real surprising thing, and it really surprised a lot of people at the month and the time of day that tornado came through, which is something statistically can happen in this state. Any month, it has happened. Any month out of the year, we can have a tornado. Any time of the day that's possible. Even beyond the heat of the afternoon and the evening hours. So it's incredible. And as you and I were talking before this, the experience of that and how that's translated not only into your personal lives but your professional life as well. Being able to apply those experiences and what just the survival of it, but the lessons learned and using that professionally, I would imagine it has probably a bigger impact on your audiences when you talk to them by being able to share that personal experience than something that maybe you read that someone else experienced.
One of the key things we try to get across as we're teaching people to become leaders or enhancing their current level of leadership skill is that everyone's got a story. Yeah. Every single person has a story. Some people are extroverts like myself who will share everything. Some people are introverts who keep it all inside. So, my story may be a tornado hit my house. Someone else's story may be that their mom's going through cancer right now. Someone else is going through a divorce. Someone else, their kids are struggling in school. Someone else had their car repossessed. Someone else's, daughter just lost their job. And so there's all these things that are going on, and sometimes when we're just in management mode, we go into the whole suck it up, you have a job to do, get your job done. Whereas leaders, especially servant leaders, will take the time to get to know their employees and will say, okay, I know you've got a story. There's something going on. Do you want to share that with me so I can adapt my leadership style to be with you? Because, I saw my leader come out to work and tell me, come out to the site, take all the time you need, what can we do to help, doing collections, all kinds of stuff, as opposed to just, get back to work.
Right.
But, not everybody goes through a tornado. Some people also have other issues, whether it be a car wreck or that someone's pet died. We always talk about that and saying, I got to call in sick for 2 days, my dog died. Some people will just say, suck it up, it's a dog,
Right,
get back to work.
Yeah.
But if I know my employee and I know that they've lived by themselves for the past 20 years and they've had this dog for 20 years and that they need grieving, I need to know that as their leader, and that's going to build a connection with them as opposed to just being their manager. So those are things, again, everybody's story is important, and true leaders will understand that and will work within those parameters for all their employees.
Well said. Well said. I know time's running out. I want to give you a chance to let everybody know what's coming down the road in the next 6 months to a year. What are you working on? What's got you excited these days?
We're going through a strategic 5-year plan here at the Personnel Board of Jefferson County, and our training department is going to grow. So we're excited about all the leadership training offerings that we're about to do. I got to tell you, sometimes, Dennis, government employees get a bad rap. There's this stereotype out there that government employees, whether it's local or federal, are lazy and overqualified, all these
Right.
things. I work with some of the nicest, smartest people who may have some bad leaders who just aren't there for them. So that's going on. In addition, I'm always doing my public speaking on the side. You can go to my website at peteblank.com and learn more about if you want me to come do a talk for your organization or do some kind of motivational speech. I'll be happy to come inspire your employees and help lead them to success. And you can always see me on my website at peteblank.com. And that's pretty much what's going on, just keep on keeping on, right?
You bet you. You bet you. Pete, thank you so much for the time. Thanks so much, and best wishes to you and your family.
Thank you, Dennis. My pleasure.
And again, that was Pete Blank, who handles all the leadership training here in Jefferson County. The website, peteblank.com. I'll make sure we put that in the show notes on the blog as well so you can get to that and learn more about Pete. Fantastic. As I told him when we got done, I said, off the air, said really could have spent a lot more time talking with you. There's a lot of great stories, a lot of great insights. And one of the things I enjoyed, I got the chance to see one of his presentations just a few weeks ago. It's not your traditional presentation about all the things you need to do, this and that and the other. He's a funny guy. And he brings a lot of that humor into his presentations as well. The audience really enjoys him. He really gets the room gets him. He gets the room. It's a really great experience. So if you're looking for someone to speak at your organization, to do some leadership training, he's fantastic at that. Would be great for that. That wraps up this edition of the CrossDig.com podcast. Thank you so much for watching or listening, and join us next time right here. And for more information, always check us out at CrossDig.com. Have a great day.